This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Information at vachamber.com. Virginia hospitals and health systems provide jobs. They support our economy and promote public health. Local hospitals are always open to help people with unexpected health needs. Having a stable healthcare network is vital. Virginia hospitals are our lifeline.
It's amazing what my students with special needs can accomplish. Their pride is priceless. That's why I teach.
Brought to you by the Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and a very special welcome back to Secretary Rick Brown. Appreciate your coming back on This Week in Richmond. You know, before we started the show, we were talking about your time here in Richmond, which spans about 46 years, and I was asking you, and tell our viewers some about how you intended to be here for a short time, but have stayed.
Yeah, it's 46 years ago. I started as a staffer for, then it was an executive legislative task force called the Revenue Resource and Economic Study Commission. And what they did was revenue projections and expenditure projections for the state. It was a General Assembly only came in every 2 years, and that was sort of the preview of coming attractions about whether it was going to be a tough session or an easy session, depending on what was the projections look like. And then they were refined. That report was usually done in about July before the General Assembly came in the next January, and then the revenue projections would be refined during the course of the next 6 months and incorporated into the governor's proposed budget, which was introduced then the first day of the session.
Right, there was no preview time.
That's
in
right.
December.
It was you
ready,
hit the ground running
when
it was done.
Here's the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Would there have been as many changes to the budget as you've seen in more recent years when it was handled that way?
Well, there's a lot more players in the budget process. Back then, it was introduced only at the House. And of course, they kept it for about 3/4 or 80% of the session. Then it went over to the Senate, and of course, the Senate would always complain they didn't have enough time to look at it. So in the mid-'80s, the dual introduction process started, and then the date got moved in the early '90s to introducing it in December, so that there was more time for public input. So today you've got a lot more players in the game and a lot more sort of little stages that it goes through. A lot of the projections that go into the budget, Medicaid, some of the inmate population forecast all have to be done statutorily in the fall. So you're just feeding the process. It goes year round now.
Well, now, what about on the forecasting of the revenue side? Has that, with changes in technology and everything, has that become easier, or is it the fluctuations made it more difficult?
It's become a little bit more technical with the changes in technology. It's the equations, the ability to run scenarios is certainly enhanced over time. At the same time, society has become more complex, so tax issues themselves have become a lot more complex, and what seemed to be so simple as just an income tax applied to income gets very technical at times. The other thing that's happened is over time most of the, we're an income tax state. About 2/3 of our general fund comes from income tax. And that is pretty high, really. If you look at income tax states, it's normally between about 45%, something like that. So we're in the upper echelons of dependence on income taxes. But in the distant past, that was driven pretty much, and still is, by withholding. That's the wages and salary take. And if you look over time, that's been a pretty steady growth in Virginia. There's been, divots with recessions, but it's been pretty stable and growing. The thing that's happened is we've got a lot more income from non-wage income now, interest, dividends, rents, and that's called the non-withholding portion of the income tax. And that used to be 3 components of the income tax: withholding, non-withholding, and refunds. The refunds and the non-withholding used to really sort of offset themselves, and so the real driver was the withholding, and that's just a function of salaries and job creation. The non-withholding has become a much more potent piece of the action, and you look at the last 3 years, you go 15, 14, and 13, you went surplus, shortfall, surplus, record-breaking, surplus, all of that driven by non-withholding. That piece of the action was responsible, major component in all 3 of those years. So, and that's much more volatile, as you would imagine. And as we've become more urbanized, just more families own stock and they're into other kinds of enterprises, and so it's become more prominent, more volatile, and it's added a layer of complexity and concern. This last session, even so, well, 2 sessions ago, after the shortfall happened in 14, we're so concerned about it, we put a cap, what we call a collar on non-withholding. We started looking back in time and said, okay, non-withholding will average about 12% to upward to about 18, 19% of total revenues. And over the course, of course, that'll vary depending on the business cycle. And we tried to look at where the average was, and when we reach those upper echelons, we have a high degree of risk, and to cut some of the downside risk on just it not materializing, because that materializes late. We got quarterly reporting on non-wage salary. The non-withholding also incorporates the final payment for income tax, which doesn't come into May 1st. So there's 4 payments on estimated payments, but 2 of them occurs in the last quarter of the year, May 1st and June 15th. So a lot of non-withholding comes in the last part of the year, which little time to adjust if it is not there. Yes. And that was the problem. In 14, we were actually, in April, we were ahead of the forecast. By June, we were 1.6% behind the forecast. So it changed sort of overnight on us with a lot less time to react to it.
Speak a little bit about sequestration, how that has affected finances, and also then about the rainy day fund wasn't around in the early years.
Let's start with sequestration. Sequestration is affected withholding, principally. A lot of the high wage, Virginia, first of all, is pretty much a service economy. We have a small but diverse manufacturing base, but the principal driver is services. And within services, the professional and business occupational classes, the big driver, because that's the high wage sector. A lot of that is located on the urban crescent, a lot of it in Northern Virginia. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of and you can imagine in Northern Virginia, it's sort of all the doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs that make the federal government move, related some, whether it's research, whether it's lobbying, whether it's legal work, whether it's defense work, contractors, all embedded in that professional and business services. Very high paying jobs. And so as sequestration came and the federal government tries to get a handle on its budgetary problems squeezed Virginia. So we're number one in terms of per capita procurement. Everything sort of goes through Virginia, whether it's whether it's manufactured in Wisconsin or California, it's procured in Virginia, and so and that's part of that apparatus. So as that gets squeezed, we lose some of those high-paying jobs, and we were losing high-paying jobs in Northern Virginia, even though the economy was growing. We have to grow sort of double time, because if you look at retail, leisure, you're talking about positions that are about a half the salary of those higher paid positions. So that's the way sequestration really affected us. It was a real cut for a couple of years, about a year and a half, and it was a real drag on the Virginia economy. And for the first time, we started underperforming the nation. As a rule, Virginia would go into recession later than the nation, come out earlier. And we didn't do that this time. We sort of plugged along. As you know, you look at just calendar year 14, we didn't really grow at all. I mean, it was just zero, gross state product growth. So, and that was really tied to sequestration, the loss of jobs. And that was prevalent, especially in Northern Virginia and Tidewater. Richmond and Central Virginia was still growing at that time. But again, some of those jobs were just not of the high-paying caliber that the jobs you were losing.
And so then, the comment on the rainy day fund, because that wasn't around in some of your early years.
It started out in the Wilder administration, you may recall, which was the first recession. It was the first time in modern history we had, in '91, that we had lost money in the general fund. It was a fraction, 0.3%, I think, and paled in comparison to some of the later events. But the notion was there needed to be, a cash reserve for the Commonwealth to fare during these downturns, and there was no formal mechanism to do it. Governor Wilder recommended a revenue reserve of $200 million, and that ended up in the budget for at least a short period of time till the recession came. It was just an unappropriated balance in the budget. Then later, subsequent J. Lark did a study on rainy day funds and it became formalized in the Constitution, and has been around since. The mechanism of the stabilization fund means that during good times, you're putting money into it. In bad times, you can dip into it. So we've had to, dip into that, especially during the Great Recession. We've had to dip into it when we had the 14 shortfall. We're putting money back in. In 17, we'll have a deposit of about $605 million, to the largest, I think, single deposit to that fund, and we'll be about $850 million with interest in that fund by the end of 17. So getting back up, cap on it is you haven't figured it out lately, but it's approximately about $2 billion for the cap.
Yes. Well, I know that it's been a busy session, this being a budget session, and we'll let our viewers know that we're having a conversation before we know the governor's perspective on the budget as to whether he wants to recommend some changes to the General Assembly. By the time our viewers are seeing this, they will have been reading how that went and other matters. But any maybe closing comments you'd want to make about how did it go in the budgeting process this year? The budget that came from the governor, the budget that was sent back to the governor.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to work closely with House and Senate. Like I said, I participated in House Appropriation, Capital Outlay Tour. We tried to keep each other informed as we went along. I think the process went pretty well. I mean, it has for the last 2 years, as a matter of fact. I mean, there have been other, legislative battles, but the budget has been fairly smooth.
Right.
And part of that is just the desire for everybody to keep up in communications on it. I think always have differences of opinions when it comes to these matters, but we have been able to solve them and not let it become a real point of contention where it gets things unaccomplished. The governor went into the budgetary process, big priorities, education, both higher education, K-12, research, and workforce training. Some economic development, especially in the emerging industries. Did very, very well in education. This is really an education budget, both on K-12 and about $900 million, I think, for K-12 over and above current funding levels, another $300 for higher ed. So research proposal intact, a little bit different in the way the government proposed it, but certainly intact, a brand new mechanism to try to build on commercialization, create jobs in Virginia. So from a global perspective, it was a very, very good budget experience, not only for the General Assembly in terms of cooperation, but I think for the governor in terms of his priority, and I think it'll be good for Virginia citizens. And we'll have a budget.
Yes. Secretary Brown, thank you so much for being on This Week in Richmond. I appreciate it. We look forward to having another conversation with you.
Okay, my pleasure.
Delighted to have Jim Rothrock back on This Week in Richmond, the Commissioner for the Department for Aging.
Caught you on that last
Rehabilitation
time.
Services. I will not say
There you go.
of or own or
There you
whatever,
go.
but
Prepositions are important.
Right, it's for aging. But now, Jim, one thing we want to talk about, even though you say it's probably sold out right now, is that there's a big governor's event that's, I think, on aging.
Yes,
Right,
yes,
yeah.
yes. When Governor McAuliffe was transitioning, he asked for a lot of people who are stakeholders to give him ideas about what he should do for his 4 years. And one of the things that was mentioned was that the Commonwealth had not had a conference on aging for many years. And with the magnitude of the aging population, the governor adopted very early his desire, communicated to our agency, to have a governor's conference on aging. And so indeed this May 2nd and 3rd out at Short Pump at the Hilton, we are indeed having a governor's conference.
Well, now what, do you want to say something about what some of the things they're going to be dealing with at that conference, or even what you hope to find in the outcome?
Well, I think the important thing is that this is not going to be the last conference on aging.
Right.
With the dynamics, the demographics that you're well aware of, vintage Virginians are growing by leaps and bounds.
We are. Yes.
We are indeed. There's I think 1.5 million of us today are over 65. And by 2030 or so, that's going to rise to 2 million. So the numbers are really growing. And the Commonwealth needs to have this conversation about what we're going to do. And this conference allows us not to end, but to begin this conversation about what we're going to do with and for our aging population.
I hope everyone heard you use that word that you used when you were on before, vintage.
Vintage Virginians. When I got this job
that's perfect.
to work with the aging community due to a reorganization, I really didn't know what type of taxonomy to use, and did not like elder, did not like senior, certainly didn't like old.
Yeah, right.
As I am one of us,
Right.
So I went in my office and came up with vintage Virginians, and that has a certain level of class to me that makes the aging process a little better.
Right. Well, there's a whole lot of discussion about Virginia being a veteran-friendly
Yes.
state, and as I read about this conference, it's like some of the outcomes is to really say what do we need to do to make Virginia one of the best states for vintage folks.
For aging and aging in place, absolutely. Yeah. We have benefited very much from good sponsorship. We've got Dominion, Humana, AARP, and Genworth. We're very quick to come to us and say, we're willing to help you financially to sponsor this ongoing discussion. And there's several other sponsors that have also come along. And we're really hoping to identify issues, bring those together, and educate each other about some of these topics that are emerging is really critical for us to look at.
Jim, the agency is also rehabilitative services,
Right.
so I don't want to use all of our time talking about this event. If there's some other things you'd like to tell folks about that are happening.
Well, let me do two things on the aging conference,
Right.
and I'd be glad. You know, some of the topics that we're going to talk about, and the theme is, let me get this right, designing our own future, designing our future. And we're going to be looking at financial exploitation, helping communities plan for livable communities. Here in Richmond, we're very fortunate that there's been a group of individuals that have worked to plan what we're going to do to be more accessible, to be more responsive, and develop the network of services to support people. So these are just a couple of the topics, along with a luncheon speaker that you and I know, an expert on hoarding, the psychology behind hoarding. And I'm sorry that I can't promote more people coming because we're sold out. But it's going to be an exciting conference. And again, the impact is going to be longitudinal, not just this May, but a discussion that will be going.
Well, I'm sure there'll be good information coming from it that will
Absolutely.
be publicly available then, even for those of us who can't get inside the
All of the presentations will be online.
That's great.
And we will be able to share that. And when we have the next meeting, which we anticipate in a year or 18 months, before the end of the McAuliffe administration, we will be able to bring these topics up with recommendations to the new governor and the new administration that'll be coming in about 2 years.
Right. Okay. Other matters.
Some of the other things we're dealing with is Governor McAuliffe has had an executive order 46, directing both state agencies and private sector industries to look at hiring more individuals with disabilities. And we are doing some interesting things along with Secretary Jones in Commerce and Trade and in our workforce components of the state government. One is an event we're having at Wilson Workforce and Rehabilitation Center in April, where we're going to be focusing on some collaboration we're having with CVS, the drug chain.
Right.
They've come to us, and we've actually recreated on our campus at WWRC a CVS store. And we're going to be training our students on how to work in their stores with
fantastic.
their technology, their stocking
Yeah.
system, their barcodes, their cash registers, and their materials, so that when they go home, be it Alexandria or Appomattox, they will have the skill set needed and will be flagged for the welcoming CVSs to go and start working. So that's going to be something exciting too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That certainly will. Well, it's a busy time. Anything else in the for aging or the rehabilitative that you'd mentioned?
Yeah,
Was it a good legislative session?
We had a good session, knock on wood.
Yes.
We had some really important money that we got for guardianship, public guardianship. Too many people are unfriended and are declared incapacitated by the courts and need someone to help them make important life decisions. And we got some funding for that, and that's really important. So we had a good session. We have a big study that Delegate Peace authored that directs us to do something we wanted to do, which is the best kind of legislation, to really look deeply at financial exploitation of adults. Again, there's no place in hell hot enough for somebody that takes advantage of an adult whose capacity is diminished and rip them off.
And you hear about it practically every day, happening somewhere.
Somehow. And so we're working and have already gotten interest from the financial institutions about measures that we can take to identify the process where funds are being diminished and perhaps even go in and stop it, as opposed to what we're doing now, where, we can find out after the money's gone, perhaps we can prosecute the offender, but it's too late. We're looking at some preventive actions and are getting good interest from the people that we're looking to work with. So we'll be starting on that in spring, summer.
Jim, as you get started on that, and after this event coming up in May, and you've had time to digest that, we want to have you back on, and we'll have some discussion and tell viewers around the Commonwealth about some of what came out of that. But appreciate your being on today.
It's always appreciated being with you, and know that the word gets out through this venue. Thank you very much.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community. For jobs, the economy, and public health, Virginia Hospitals, our lifeline.
The Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.